And then you're more than welcome to stay for the whole meeting, or you can log off and watch live on our Facebook or YouTube. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you.
Good afternoon.
And we're also joined this afternoon by our Chief Executive Officer, Glenn Patterson. So I welcome him, our governance team and our technical team that are providing support this evening. So in line with the restrictions placed on public gatherings by the Victorian Government, we have no public gallery this afternoon, and I'd like to commence the opening of the meeting with the Statement of Acknowledgment. The City of Casey proudly acknowledges the traditional owners, Casey's Aboriginal communities and their rich culture, and pays respect to their elders past, present and future. We acknowledge Aboriginal people as Australia's first peoples and as the traditional owners and custodians of the land in which we work and live. The diversity statement. The City of Casey is home to a remarkable diversity of cultures, languages, faiths, identities, landscapes and stories. From our first Australians to our most recent arrivals and every wave between, the City of Casey welcomes and represents all community members and their respective ambitions to live healthy, rewarding and happy lives. These intersecting and overlapping community stories from Casey's collective identity and contribute to its evolving, rich history. We recognise this diversity as our strength and we aim to share, nurture and celebrate it. Move to item 2, the confirmation of minutes. Do I have a mover and seconder to confirm the council meeting held on the 2nd of June?
Yes, I move that.
Moved, Mr Belmar. Seconded?
Happy to second.
Mr Cameron. All in favour? Carried unanimously. Item 3, declaration of interests. I have considered my obligations under section 79 of the Local Government Act and confirm no conflict of interest relevant to the agenda papers this evening, and I note that no officers have declared conflicts in reports presented tonight. Do either of my fellow administrators declare an interest?
Nothing from me.
And no declaration from me.
No interest declared. Item 4, public question time. We have no public questions received for tonight's meeting. So I move on to item 5, which is officers' reports, and there's only one purpose of the meeting this afternoon, and that is the presentation of submissions to Council's budget 2020-21. And I welcome those submitters. We have had a number of submitters, and this is a process under the Local Government Act where Council receives submissions to its advertised budget within a 28-day period, and those people submitting to Council's budget process can also ask to be heard. And so this meeting tonight is the administrators hearing the submissions from those who've requested to be heard. And we have a number and variety of submitters presenting. We have 8 in total this afternoon. And I firstly welcome Mr. Kasuni Mendes from the Alliance for Gambling Reform and invite him to speak. I just remind all the speakers, I will allow you 5 minutes each, and we look forward to hearing your submissions. So I welcome Mr. Mendes. Thank you.
Hello. My name is Kasuni. I am the Council Gambling Harm Support Worker for the Alliance for Gambling Reform. The Alliance for Gambling Reform brings together organisations and local councils from across Australia to advocate for advocacy of the reform of the gambling industry. We campaign for reforms of the gambling industry that reduces the harm that it causes. Latest figures show that Australia-wide, almost $25 billion was lost to gambling. Increasingly, research shows that there are links between gambling harm and other public health issues, such as mental ill health, family violence, homelessness, and other chronic illnesses. The Alliance is the only non-partisan national advocacy organisation dedicated to preventing gambling harm. We refuse funding linked to the gambling industry. Our board and staff have lived experience with gambling harm, skills in advocacy, media, community development, and policy. Our staff include our Council's Gambling Harm team, our campaigns team, and our Champions for Change team who help lift the voices of lived experience advocates. The City of Casey has the second highest amount of losses of all local government areas in the state. On average, $362,000 are lost every day at the pokies in the City of Casey across 13 venues and 900 machines. We've seen the leadership Council has shown in standing by the community to oppose pokies. This is really great to see. Council's current electronic gaming machine strategy also seeks to reduce gambling harm in the community, and one of the key objectives is to take an advocacy role in relation to government policies and by working in partnership with other municipalities and groups that seek to also reduce harm. We know that in seeking to reduce harm in our local communities, we'll have a much greater chance of winning if we use our voices together in a coordinated way. That's why our network of leadership councils is so important and why we are seeking a partnership with the City of Casey to join us. We also work with councils to help develop their policies around gambling harm and help facilitate community engagement and campaigns when applications for machines are lodged. There's also a lot of concern around pokies venues reopening in the COVID-19 context. And this is why we are working together with councils, supporters, lived experience advocates, and the media to advocate for strategies that reduce the risk of harm to our vulnerable communities as advised by public health experts. Our leadership councils have been important voices in leading the recovery process as reducing gambling harm by keeping money going into more productive and sustainable local jobs and businesses is an imperative. The Alliance is also deeply concerned about the rise in online gambling products being promoted to people during this time of crisis due to COVID-19. We know that the community will be experiencing heightened levels of anxiety, increased physical and mental ill health, instability, and financial stress. We also know that people who are socially isolated are more vulnerable to gambling harm. Communities are in great need of protection from gambling harm at the present time. At the same time, the disruptive nature of these events mean that we have an opportunity to reassess the pervasive and harmful presence of gambling in our society and the influence the industry has come to wield. That's why we've recently launched our campaigns to end gambling ads in sport, just like we did in Australia for tobacco. In summary, Council's doing a great job, but we'd love your help to take your advocacy and local action further and work together to reduce gambling harm in the City of Casey. Thank you.
Thank you, Kusini, and my apologies for the incorrect terminology because I couldn't see you. So thank you. Thank you very much for your contribution. I now invite Carolyn Crawford to join us and to speak to her submission. Thank you, Carolyn.
Yes, hello all. My name's Carolyn Crawford and I actually am a lived experience person as far as gambling is concerned. I'm also a member of the Alliance for Gambling Reform, but the Champions for Change side of things. I was affected by gambling, and the reason I am speaking at this submission is I'm hoping that the Casey Council will join with the Alliance in fighting this scourge of poker machines. Poker machines have been in these areas for a long time now. I, for one, I actually was sent to prison at the age of 64. I stole money from the company that I work with, not something I'm very proud of. I have paid all that money back, and I was sentenced to 18 months for taking that money. Every cent of what I took went into poking. And when I say every cent, it was $4,000 went into the poker machine. They are an addictive, horrible thing to have around. The less that are around, the more income can go to families and can go back into the community, which is so important. It will stop, hopefully, a lot of family violence taken a lot of machines, or at least improve machines. This is really important to me, and it breaks my heart to think of what I've done in the past. I hurt myself before. My family absolutely survived. There are things there don't other. I know it's very.
I'm sorry, Ms Crawford, could I ask you just to pause because we've lost your audio, so we're not hearing you just at the moment. Just bear with us. Please try and continue. We just, I think, had a bit of an interruption with the internet, so please continue.
Yes, certainly. I'm not sure where I got to with you, but
Yes, we can hear you now.
Oh, great. Okay. I hope you got the story about me being in prison.
Yes, we did.
Yes.
Thank you.
There's a lot of people when they come out, they don't have the support I had, and if the machines are there, they will go to them. They will. It is a stress reliever, and you do not realise just how addictive they are. If you go into a hotel and they serve you numerous drinks, they will see if you are drunk. If you go into a hotel or a club or anywhere and you've been on drugs, they will be able to see that. But if you go anywhere, into any venue, as a gambling addict, they cannot see that. You do not look any different to anybody else. You look the same. You can put thousands through, as I have in the past. And this is why I am urging desperately for you to join the Alliance. The Alliance has helped me a lot. I'm very, very, I am a very good advocate for them. I love, and this probably sounds strange, but I do love telling my story to people because I want to stop just one person ending up where I did. I don't want one more person either committing suicide, as I thought I was going to do many times, or ending up in prison or taking or stealing money, whether it be from an employee, whether it be at knife point, gunpoint, or just robbing somebody. And this happens. I have heard so many stories since I've been out, and I've only been out a couple of years now, and I heard so many stories in there of people that were in there for the same reason as me, for stealing money to get. I won't go on any longer about my history. I just urge the council, please really, really consider joining the Alliance to help fight this dreaded battle, because it has to stop. The economy will be far better off without it. Thank you.
Thank you, Carolyn, for your presentation this afternoon and for sharing your experience. We appreciate it. I now move on to Mirsad Silimovic, and I am happy to be corrected on that pronunciation. Welcome.
Thank you for having me. That's a very good pronunciation, actually. Look, I wanted to run through a submission for the budget. It was in relation to a reserve that I sort of feel has been somewhat neglected in the council's capital works program, and I was a little bit disappointed to see the draft budget for Rivergum didn't have any inclusion or mention of it. I have prepared a pack that I'll just initiate the screen share of just now. So if you can confirm that you're able to see that.
We do have, yes, we do. Thank you.
Wonderful. All right. So I sort of pieced this together just to provide a bit of a visual aid. But in essence, so the reserve that I'm referencing is the Green Valley Crescent Reserve. And I'm sort of hoping that the council can take a sort of deeper look at uplifting that reserve to hopefully transform it into a recreational area that provides eco-friendly pedestrian and cycling connection to the Hampton Park shopping square, which will hopefully become Hampton Park Central. So I'll start with the location, which I think is one of the sort of prime reasons for consideration. It's effectively less than about 165 metres from the Hampton Park shopping square itself. So it's naturally become a pedestrian and cycling connection, from a lot of homes around the area, especially the Hallam Road and Pound Road intersection. You can see the extensive foot traffic from the makeshift paths where the grass has been trampled right throughout the reserve. And it's a little bit disappointing that the reserve hasn't gotten the attention to see a bit more of an uplift. So the current state of the reserve is, sadly, it has two rusted old swings. I've got two small children myself. And the screech on the swings at some point was that loud that I just brought along some WD-40 one time and had to lubricate them myself to make them usable. Like I said, the play equipment there is very underwhelming despite the extensive space that is available in the reserve. A couple of years ago as well, I sort of raised this with council. The reserve itself didn't have any form of lighting whatsoever, so at night time it was completely pitch dark. It was sort of attracting quite a lot of antisocial behaviour as a result of things like public drinking, littering, graffiti. I think on several occasions I spotted drug transactions and consumption there as well. Fortunately the council, I think a couple of years ago, did put in a couple of solar lights, which sort of helped alleviate that. But again, that's sort of only towards the immediate area connecting into the shopping square, which means that the rest of the reserve is simply still pitch black. Again, there is a path there. It is a very limited gravel path that doesn't sort of reach all the areas that pedestrians and cyclists typically use. And unfortunately, I think because of the poor maintenance in the reserve itself, it's led to it sort of being, ripped up by teenagers with dirt bikes and things like that. The other concern with the reserve as well is that it is actually used as an overflow. So there is a creek that runs through when we do have heavy rains. And what I've actually noticed is that the levels of the stormwater it can get quite high, to the point that they are very near to the properties adjacent to it. And I've actually got that, I think, captured in the next slide as a video for you to see. So this is a scenario where we did have heavy rains and overflow. You can just sort of notice that proximity to the neighbouring fences along the path there. So my proposal, I guess, I was hoping the council would be open to looking at, uplifting and developing the reserve a little bit better, making it, more of a family-friendly area, given its proximity, to the Hampton Park shopping square, as well as the heavy pedestrian, and cycling use that it does get. Again, as I sort of understand from some of the publications from City of Casey, is that that Hampton Park shopping square serves up to 60,000 people, which is almost 25% of Casey's residents. And it would be great to see that that eco-friendly connection with proper pedestrian and cycling paths to replace the makeshift ones that are there at the moment. The area and the paths should be illuminated. Again, sort of in winter time, it does get dark quite early, and I've noticed a lot of people, carrying their shopping bags back, walking along the makeshift paths with their mobile phones. It just seems to be, a really poor state of affairs at the moment, to be honest. And hopefully the recreational equipment, could be upgraded to better utilise the space that it has. Better children's playground would go a long way. Perhaps even a small sports field. And even a barbecue area. I'm not sure if that's still achievable in the post-COVID world, but a suggestion nonetheless. And I think another thing for consideration should perhaps be sort of Rock Creek banks, just to better control the overflow, and perhaps a deeper channel, just to make sure the flood damage risk is effectively mitigated there. And I guess lastly, given the park has proximity to the River Gum Creek Reserve, where we've sort of got the wetlands and a nice playground across the road from Hallam Road, it'd be really great to see, I think this is an ambitious point, but perhaps a cycling or a pedestrian overpath. So at the moment, that intersection, there's traffic lights that sort of, let cars turn left, where residents are typically crossing the road at the same time. There is a flashing sign that says "Give way to pedestrians," but you often see cars, trying to make the amber light, and they're a little bit surprised to see a pedestrian in the middle of a footpath. And I mean, it's quite often that we've gone for bike rides with the kids and other family and friends, and you sort of see cars screeching to a halt. Once they realise that there's a small child crossing the road, I think it's quite a dangerous scenario as people are trying to get to those recreational areas close by. But that's all for my proposal. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your presentation. I'm presuming that you will send through that presentation, if you haven't already, to officers.
Certainly, happy to.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thanks again for taking the time to submit and present to us today.
Cheers.
I think I'm now moving on to Mr. Brendan Brown, who is our next speaker. Mr. Brown from Casey Residents and Ratepayers Association, welcome. And you're speaking to rate increases in 2021. Go ahead, Mr. Brown. Mr. Brown, we're not hearing you, so perhaps you need to turn on your speaker.
Sorry. All right.
Thank you. We can hear you now. Thank you very much.
As you noted, I'm here representing the Casey Residents and Ratepayers Association. Firstly, we do commend you and the council officers on many aspects of the budget, and we've noted those in the first page or so of our submission. We'll start by looking at, if I can operate, how do I get this, sorry, I'm just fiddling about with the slideshow here, Rhys.
That's okay. Take your time.
It might be because it's in the moment.
I think. Just give me a second. There you go. You should.
We did have the presentation, now we've lost it.
I've got an expert looking at it right now.
We're seeing the presentation now. Thank you.
You are, but I'm not.
So the slide we're viewing reads, rates in Casey are high.
Yeah. Okay, great. I'll continue on. Just identifying the problem that we have is that rates in Casey are about $70 higher than the Victorian average. And when we look at incomes and wealth and standard of living, then there's various measures, but basically the standard of living in Casey and incomes are lower than the Victorian average. And if you look at the middle to inner suburbs in Melbourne, that disparity is even more obvious because their incomes are higher and yet their rates are lower. Excellent, the screen worked. But even a bigger problem than that is there is a disconnect between rates charged and people's capacity to pay. And one of the reasons for this is that rates are not directly linked to income. And this is a problem in an area where you've got a lot of mortgage stress, but in addition to that, we had incomes that are falling due to the recession. And while we do acknowledge the measures that the City of Casey has taken with the current recession, we say these do not go far enough. And the fair go rate capping system is not a total solution to the problem at hand because it ignores the fact that wages growth is not even across Victoria, and it also didn't anticipate the current recession. And that little graph there is just showing what we had in Casey is rates going up by about 60% after adjustment for inflation over a period of 10 years. And then in the last few years, the rates had effectively stayed at that record high level. And because garbage charges keep going up, then the overall rates and charges is actually still increasing slightly ahead of the inflation rate. Fixing the problem, and it's fixing the part of the problem that the City of Casey can address. And we say there is a need to stop the rates and charges increase. So it's in there in the budget, and we're proposing that an average rate reduction significant enough to offset the garbage charge increase. And this is all in the average, and we know it will impact different ratepayers in different ways. But providing that rate reduction would cost around $5.3 million. When we compare that with other figures in the budget, the draft budget plans to pay off $7.479 million off the loan from the Bunjil Place building. And another point of high expenditure that could be looked at is the arts expenditure is $4.25 million. That is a net amount, and the majority of that is spent at Bunjil Place. And certainly to the untrained eye, we don't seem to be getting value for money, and it seems a bit of a disproportionate spend in that area. In terms of achieving a rate reduction, we say it is very achievable. We say, look, we've got the opportunity at the moment to take advantage of low interest rates so that extending the loan out over a longer period of time will not be overly costly. And also, because we've got a growing revenue base that comes with a growing population, then it means that we can continue to pay off the loan and still keep the overall loan or amount that we owe the amount that we owe can stay at quite a moderate level. Our proposal is to reduce repayments on Bunjil Place by about $4 million, and this creates a savings in the short term, but it also enables a fairer distribution of the cost over a more reasonable time frame. At the moment, we're trying to pay off a $135 million asset over a 10-year period. As I mentioned, other areas where we could look at is perhaps the arts expenditure of $4.25 million. Under our proposal, we say that every single ratepayer who is negatively affected by the current recession will benefit to some extent, and that our proposal complements the other measures the City of Casey have put in place. We also had a petition. I know when I last checked it was over 100 people had signed it, so I'll have to look at how I can get that to you as well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Brown. And can I ask you also to make your presentation available to via officers if you haven't done so already? Thank you for your submission.
Thank you.
I believe we're now going to Mr. Matt Arnott from the Casey Basketball and Netball Associations regarding speaking to sporting rent relief. Thank you and welcome.
Thank you. You can hear me okay?
Yes, we can. Thank you very much.
Excellent. Well, as you just mentioned, my name's Matt Arnott, and I sit on the board of management down at the Casey Basketball Association. I'm here today with Tammy Bauer as well, who's our general manager. And I guess we're here today presenting on behalf of both the Casey Basketball Association and the Casey Netball Association. And we wish to put forward a request for a temporary reduction of our court hire fees at Casey Stadium due to some of the requirements put forward by the state government, as well as our governing bodies being Basketball Victoria and Netball Victoria, who have recently published a return to sport set of guidelines. Prior to COVID-19, we would run games approximately every 40 minutes, and the fees that we charge to our members and players are based on maximising the number of games during the periods in which we hire the courts. So 1 hour would typically consist of approximately 1.5 games. So COVID-19, as we all know, has changed many things, and unfortunately basketball, netball and other community sports are not exempt from this. The lockdown period for us has been fairly challenging. All of our regular forms of income have just completely dried up. So we've had zero income coming in for the last several months now since closure. We've certainly done our best to try and keep staff supported throughout the period of lockdown and motivated as well, the best we can. So in readiness, they're ready to come back keen and eager. We've also tried to keep our members actively engaged through the lockdown period. I think Netball have done the same. We've created a lot of videos and things to try and keep players, particularly the junior players, interested, keeping them active and keeping them working through the period. As I mentioned before, our governing bodies they've created a set of guidelines, and a lot of those guidelines are going to result in increased cost for us. So just some examples of what we're going to have to do once we do reopen competition. Hand sanitisers are going to need to be supplied at points of entry, as well as on the score bench of every court. And players are going to have to use the hand sanitiser during all breaks and all substitutions. There's going to be restrictions on cash handling at canteens. We obviously operate our own canteens at outside venues, and it may force the closure of those if we don't have FPOS facilities, or we will have to obviously then pay to get FPOS facilities implemented. Temperature testing is recommended. As well as this, we need to appoint a biosafety officer at each venue in which we operate through our competitions to ensure that all the guidelines are adhered to. And games will not be able to commence until the biosafety officer's completed a head count for the number of people per court to make sure it's all within the guidelines. So there's a number of costs there that we're going to need to incur apart from our normal higher costs of the court. So one of the biggest changes, I guess, which is really coming to the point that's in the guidelines is there's now going to be the introduction of a 20-minute break between all games. And this is to allow for crowds to clear out of the previous game before the new crowd for the following game comes in. It's full sanitation of all facilities, so the laptop computers used on score benches, the bench seating, the scoreboard controllers. There's hand sanitizer that has to be on the score bench for referees and the score bench officials. All court surfaces have to be cleaned with a minimum of warm water and disinfectant. Door handles, taps, seating, all of those extra things need to be cleaned as well between each game. So there's a lot to do in that 20-minute period, but effectively what it means for us is that post-COVID-19, 1 hour will only really consist of one game per hour rather than approximate 1.5 games, as I mentioned earlier. So due to the cost increases, what we're asking of council is to agree to a reduction in the court hire fees that we pay until the government and our basketball and netball, Victoria, allow competitions to return to normal. So the forced break between each game, the 20-minute forced break, it will not draw any income for our association. And it's for this reason that we request that this 20-minute period required for cleaning and sanitisation not be included in our hourly fees. So really what that equates to is a 33% temporary reduction in our court hire fees on match days. Similar to match days, our training sessions are also affected by the same. So that same 20-minute cleaning and sanitisation period is mandatory after each 1 hour training session that we run. And all those requirements are to be observed. So we're also seeking the 20-minute period between each training session to be excluded from our court hire costs. Casey Basketball and Casey Netball associations will obviously cover our share of the costs involved in the other guidelines, which I've mentioned, but we just simply cannot afford to incur both a normal rate per hour as well as these increased costs throughout the period. So yeah, look, after a layoff that feels like an eternity, and we're hoping to receive support from council to ensure that our members have got a healthy and safe environment and they can return to the court as quickly as possible. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Arnott, and also to your colleague, Ms. Bauer, for your commitment and to community sport and for your input tonight. Now move on to Donald Jewell, who's speaking about fuel management and bushfires. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to have some input into the budget. I'm not representing any group in particular because I don't know how you would consult with all the groups that would be concerned, but let's say I'm representing all the people who live in the rural parts of Casey, particularly those that live near bushland. Before the coronavirus, the greatest danger facing us was bushfires. Everybody knows about the damage caused to people and their assets in East Gippsland and the northeast. Many people have commented on the need for fire fuel reduction. There's an inquiry into those fires being conducted at the moment, and I'll be very surprised if that factor is not one of the recommendations resulting. I believe the City of Casey has a duty to protect their residents. To my knowledge, Casey has done nothing towards fuel reduction, certainly in the south, in Ballabella Ward where we live, and probably in the north as well, but I don't have particular knowledge of that. I have mentioned it at the Casey Conservation Advisory Committee on several occasions. Where such an issue fits into the budget, I don't know, so I didn't attempt to connect it to anything. But quite frankly, what happened to the people in East Victoria was a matter of life and death, and considerable assets were ruined. So if you agree with me that this is an important matter, I'm sure you can fit it into the budget somewhere. I believe the budget should allow for some action to reduce thick bush near residences by clearing, by cool burns, which do no harm to the environment. This would require us to seek action in cooperation apart from with DLWP, Parks Victoria, Vic Roads and the CFA, as well as landowners who happen to have large areas of bushland on their properties. I think that's probably enough for me to say. I think you're modest than to say that I speak from my long experience of living in the bush, and if you have my submission, there are a list of the organisations that I belong to. If I could add, just by way of a little bit of humour, when I started my teaching career, on the very first night that I was boarding in the country in early 1960, we got a phone call to the place that I was boarding, and there was a fire in a nearby area, and I was asked would I like to come. No training, no great expertise required. We collected the tank from one place and the pump from another, and we set off to attend this fire. Fortunately, when we were about halfway there, it started to rain and it put the fire out, so we finished up at the local pub. Thank you for your attention. I don't know if there's anything else I can tell you.
Thank you, Mr. Jewell. And can I confirm for all of our submitters this afternoon that the administrators have had full copies of all of your submissions ahead of this afternoon's submission process? I believe there were two other submitters who had listed to be present. Can I confirm whether they have presented? No. Okay. So that concludes our public submission process, and I invite the administrators to consider the recommendation with respect to item 5.1, and that recommendation should be on the screen shortly, which is that the submitters be thanked for their presentations, etc. Do I have a mover for that recommendation?
I'm happy to move that.
Mr. Boardman moved and
I second that.
Mr. Belmar seconded. Mr. Boardman, would you like to speak to the moving of the recommendation?
To echo your words, Chair, and to thank all submitters, not just for their presentations tonight, but for the effort that they have gone through to not just review the documents, but also to provide very comprehensive presentations. I think the presentations from Mr. Semilovic is certainly heartfelt and has some significant detail around it, and from Ms. Crawford and Ms. Mendez equally are very comprehensive, and we acknowledge that. And Mr. Brown and the Casey Residents and Ratepayers Association, the work that the association has done to significantly scrutinise the budget, read through in a lot of detail and to come up with some alternatives is noted. And also to Mr. Arnott and Ms. Bowers around your current situation. And to Don Jewell, good to see you again, Don, and thank you for your constructive feedback around a matter that's certainly pertinent to your specific area of concern. This is very helpful for us. This is, in fact, Miguel and I were just commenting, this is our second meeting, and the level of quality and information that's been detailed in these papers and also in the submissions is very helpful for us to further consider this matter, and we look forward to receiving further briefings from council officers and providing an update at subsequent council meetings. So thank you again to everybody.
Thank you, Mr. Boardman. Mr. Belmar?
Thank you. I'd also like to thank each of the submitters this evening or this afternoon. They've been very helpful submissions. The material that was filed beforehand was of a very high quality and has given us plenty to think about. And it's also very pleasing to see the level of community activity over a number of issues, which Mr. Boardman has already identified, and to see the level of engagement by the residents of the City of Casey over a number of different areas. So thank you again to each of the submitters.
Thank you. So we have a mover and a seconder, and I'll put the motion to the vote. All in favour? Carried unanimously. So once again, thank you to all of those who submitted. Thank you to those listening who bore with our later start as well. I now move to item 6, consideration of reports of committees, and the only item we have is the Assembly of Councillors, which was the assembly held on the 2nd of June, and we note that record of assembly. Item 7, petitions. There are no petitions listed for the council meeting. Item 8, urgent business. No urgent business items. And so finally, I once again thank you for your submissions this afternoon, for those that have been listening to the live stream, and I declare the meeting closed. Thank you very much.